Hi, I hope you're doing well. Today, I'm here to talk about the books that I read in May. So let's just get to it. In the month of May, I read 13 books and DNF'd 2 books. I have my laptop here so that I can make sure I remember everything. In total, I read about 5,000 pages, which I'm really happy with. Up until April, my record in a month of most books read was 13, I think. And then in April I read 19, which was my own personal record. And the fact that I read 13 this month, which was previously my record, is a bit insane. But I'm happy about it. I've been very much in a reading mood. I haven't been struggling to read for longer amounts of time. A large part of that, I think, is the fact that I don't touch my phone as much anymore. I don't know if you know the app Opal, like OPAL. It basically blocks apps for you if you want. And I have it now set on hard mode pretty much all the time, other than about half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evenings. And that just blocks Instagram for me. And that's been working so well, because now if I want to go on Instagram, I have to wait about 90 seconds, if not more, to go on it. And 90 seconds does give you enough time to think about whether you really want to do it or not. So that's been helping a lot, and I've just felt like I've been rotting my brain less with scrolling. Not that I scroll that much, at least not compared to some other people I know, but I think any amount of scrolling makes you dead inside, or at least you think you're relaxing, but actually it's overstimulating you without you realizing. Either way, super happy with my habits in general right now, so I hope that continues on in June. But I think if I keep doing my hobbies, my more lower stimulation activities, I think it'll be good. Also, my voice sounds a bit off. I don't think I've spoken much today yet. It's the morning. I'm like in comfy clothes. I didn't feel too well yesterday, so I'm feeling okay now. I'm just feeling a bit weak, so it's probably why my voice sounds like this. Anyway, so let's get to the reading. Like I said, read 13 books, DNF'd 2. I'm wondering, should I go in order of worst to best, or should I go chronologically? You know what? I think I'm gonna go over some of the stats, and then we're gonna go from worst to best, because I like watching that format. So, first things first is I read only fiction this month, which is not abnormal, but like usually there is a fiction in there too. A non-fiction. I have been reading a non-fiction this month, but I haven't finished it yet, because I've just been reading it slower, because it's a book that you need to read slower, and I only count in my wrap-ups, I only count the books that I finished in that month. There's a couple books that I read in May, but I haven't finished yet, so those will go to my June wrap-up if I finish them in June. So in terms of page number, I read 1 book that has more than 500 pages, 4 books that were less than 300 pages, and then 8 books that were in between 300 and 500. The pace that I read the most was medium pace, which checks out. I'm looking at Storygraph, by the way, you know, the Storygraph stats. Storygraph says that my main moods for the month of May were mysterious, adventurous, reflective, and emotional, which is interesting. I read a good variety of genres. I read historical, romance, literary, classics, fantasy, contemporary, even a middle grade, and thriller horror. Obviously, some of these overlap. You know, some books have 2 genres. Something I'm really happy about is that I read 6 books for my Around the World challenge, so super happy about that. Some books were countries that I'd already read, but some were new countries, so very happy about that. All the books I finished this month were in English. I have been reading a Portuguese book, but I did not finish that yet, so that'll probably be for next month. And then it says my average rating is 4.15 stars. How good is that? That's crazy. I don't know if I've ever had such a high rating. I think because I've just been able to be more present in the books, because of not overstimulating myself with screen time and whatever, I've been able to be way more present with the author, with the characters, with, you know, everything. And also I've been very much purely mood reading, which is honestly what works for me, and I don't know why I ever try to not mood read, because I am such a mood reader. I absolutely cannot do like completely set TBR. So it just shows you that if you read what you're in the mood for, even if it deviates from what you think you're supposed to read, you get good ratings. Okay, so those are the stats. Now let's go to the books. Let's start with the 2 books that I DNF'd this month. Both books I DNF'd like pretty quickly. I think both of them I read maybe a chapter and I was like, nope, thank you. The one that I DNF'd is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I DNF'd this not because I hated it, not because I thought it was bad, but I just realized after one chapter, I don't think this book is going to be for me. I really struggle to enjoy books where there's a lot of self-pity. And there are some books I read where that is present and I still enjoy them. But I don't know what it is that makes me enjoy them or not. For example, what is it? Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I really didn't like that book. I found Fitz so annoying because it was just self-pity and self-pity and self-pity the whole time. I felt that I would probably feel like this with Martyr. So I can see why people would like this already. Just from one chapter, I can see why. I've just been in such a good reading mood that I don't want to destroy it by reading something that I know I won't enjoy. And I think it's completely okay to start a book and be like, no, it's okay. I don't need to continue. You know, we don't have to like all the same books. And who knows, maybe this is the type of book where I could see myself, who knows, maybe in 10 years, maybe if my taste changes, that I might like a book like this. It's not that I think this was a bad book in any way. Like, it was actually really well written. So that was my first DNF. Then my second DNF was what I do think is probably a bad book. I mean, obviously I've only read one chapter or 2, so I can't exactly say it was a really bad book, but I DNF'd this because I didn't feel it was good. It's called The Arcane Arts by S.D. Coverley. I was gonna read this for my May release for her kid. Yeah, I DNF'd it 2 chapters in. It's an age gap romance. I already do not like age gap romance. I really struggle with that concept, having experienced a negative form of that in a way. So I really don't like that. I really don't like to read about it. Especially, this is a student-teacher relationship, which is in uni, and technically he's her advisor or whatever. But no. And we were 2 chapters in, and already there were so many things that just didn't make sense. For example, the advisor is supposedly such a sought-after professor, and he only lets certain students join his staff, and he has a high standard, and blah blah blah. I didn't even tell you what this was about. So yeah, this is a dark academia fantasy. From what I understand, both the student and the teacher, her name is Elspeth and his name is Rollins. What's his first name? Thaddeus. His first name is Thaddeus. Anyway, so they both have their hidden motives as to why they are doing what they do. Elspeth had failed like a big exam that you need to get into these arcane arts, which is some magic, I don't know. I don't care. So she failed that thing because of circumstances, and now she wants to get back into it, but she has an ulterior motive that you find out and that you can probably guess like 2 or 3 chapters in. At the beginning, like I said, he's like sought after, blah blah blah, and she knows she needs to convince him to let her, you know, be a part of his course, be advised by him, whatever. And so she writes him an email. And mind you, this professor is supposedly so busy, so, you know, up there. But she writes him an email, which is incredibly, like, an incredibly childish email. Like, the way she writes is the way I expect a moody 14-year-old to write. I don't know how to explain it. He replies just as childishly, and then you read a couple emails at the beginning back and forth, and these are the most childish emails you have ever read. Like, there's no way that grown adults write like that. I mean, he was 40 something, she's 24. There's absolutely no way. That is so unrealistic. And then already there were inklings of insta lust from his side as well, and I was just like, no, no thank you, absolutely not. So I DNF'd that pretty quickly as well. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's get to my books that I actually read. My lowest rating that I gave out was 3 stars, so that's good. The first 3-star book I read was Crooked Seeds by Karen Jennings. This is a South African author. On Storygraph, the description is: a woman in post-apartheid South Africa confronts her family's troubling past in this taut and daring novel about the national trauma and collective guilt. I can see that that was part of the book, but that was not the main point, or at least not the only large point. You follow this woman that, you know what, here, there's a lot of self-pity. This woman is honestly just very difficult, but I enjoyed it still, which is funny. So I don't know where my line is with self-pitying characters that annoy me. Either way, this was so good in the sense that I could, in every character, I could see someone that I knew. I mean, me having been in South Africa a couple times, I could see these characters, you know, they were so real. I definitely know people that could have represented these characters. I listened to the audiobook, which made it even more real because the accents were actually pretty accurate. It's not a fun book, it's not a happy book, it's pretty dark, pretty like sad, tense. This is the type of book where I don't know if I would recommend it. I think I would only recommend it to people who read a lot or who have read a lot, as well as someone who might have been to South Africa, who has an understanding of the dynamics there. Because I think if you were to read this with no understanding of dynamics in South Africa right now, you would probably be either confused by certain things or shocked by certain things. Yeah, I just don't think that the actual dynamics, the meaning, the feeling of the place would come across to someone who has no experience with it whatsoever. So yeah, I found it interesting. It was good, not bad. In a way, I feel like it would have been a bit longer because it was quite short. It was like 220 pages. In a way, I think it should have been a little bit longer, just to flesh out certain more things. I can kind of see what the point was or should have been, but I feel like it needed to be a bit longer to almost round out the point. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, so let's go to the next one. Then my next 3-star is Whiteout by Adriana Anders. I read this because I discovered romantic suspense. I did not know this was a genre, but when I found out about it, I was like, you know what? I don't really read much romance, but that sounds like something that I could like. So I read another book which we'll talk about. Whiteout was, I think, my 3rd romantic suspense that I read in May. I thought it was okay. It's about this scientist. His name is Ford Cooper. His nickname is Coop. Yeah, that wasn't for me. Anyways, he's a scientist in Antarctica researching I don't know what, and then the female protagonist is Angel Smith, I think, and she's a cook at the base. She makes sure the scientists and researchers and everyone there is fed. So something happens that forces Ford and Angel to go out into the wild Antarctica carrying something that the bad guys want, and they essentially have to survive in Antarctica, which is now transitioning into winter, which obviously makes it even more dangerous to be out there. And yeah, so I mean, they fall in love. I thought it was okay. Like I said, I didn't feel much for the characters. It didn't feel very real. It felt a little bit insta-lovey, which sometimes can be okay for me. I don't know, I didn't feel very realistic. And also what I like about romantic suspense is the fact that when you have that suspense, you have no need of a 3rd act conflict. And I hate a 3rd act conflict because they always feel so unnecessary. That's why I like the idea of romantic suspense, because the suspense makes it thrilling enough that you don't need an unnecessary breakup or fight or whatever. However, this was so thrilling the whole way through, and then still there's a 3rd act conflict. What? Literally, that was so unnecessary. Yeah, so it was okay. It gave me kind of what I wanted, and I don't need to read the 2nd book. Next, I have The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I gave this 3.5 stars. I read this in English, which again, I don't know why I should have read it in French. I'm sure you all know the story of The Phantom of the Opera. I was actually quite surprised. It was a bit different from the play that I had watched. I do think the author did it better than the play, just in terms of commentary and depth and so on. But for some reason, I didn't enjoy it in the way that I had to keep reading. You know, if anything, I kept stopping and having to force myself to start again. But whatever, I'm really glad I read it. It's one of those classics you just have to have read, I think. And then we have Indigo Ridge by Devney Perry, which I gave 3.75 stars. So this is the second book that I had read on my romantic suspense journey. Yeah, it gave what I wanted. It was definitely better in the sense that there was no unnecessary third act conflict. You follow Winslow Covington, and she takes up the position of, I think, the new chief of police in this small town. And then the main character is the founding family of the town, I think, one of the sons. I mean, you can probably guess the general storyline. I thought the mystery was okay. It was not my favorite, but it gave what I wanted. Then we get to a 4-star, which is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I had tried to read this a couple of months ago via audiobook, and I really struggled with it. I don't know, I put it down. I was like, no, don't want to read this. But I decided to try it again, at least now knowing better what I was getting myself into, because before that I think my expectations were a bit skewed too. Essentially, I want to read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn to read James by Percival Everett. I know you don't need to read them. I kind of want to have that source material. It was cute. It was funny. You can tell that it was a book written to remind adults how it was to be a child, and that's what it really did for me. I feel like when we remember being a child, at least for me, I remember, certain little memories that stuck out because of, I don't know, something that happened or an emotion I felt at the time or whatever. But this reminded me of the little moments in between, like how it was to be a child with imagination and acting like I don't know, some pirate or whatever it is. It just reminded me of a child's imagination and what it felt like to have that imagination that would just be boundless, No one was telling us at the time that imagination is a bad thing. So purely for that, I thought it was a really cute read. And now I'm actually excited to read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And again, I think you just have to go into it knowing what to expect. So I'm going to maybe read Huckleberry Finn this month. I don't know. I'd like to. Then we have one more 4-star. Here's the thing though, I am thinking of bumping that 4-star. When I first finished it, it didn't feel like a 5-star in the sense of enjoyment. Like it was a pretty difficult read sometimes, but it consumed my brain so much. I wrote a whole essay about it. It consumed my mind so much that I'm wondering, should I bump it up to a 5-star? And if not a 5-star, then I think at least a 4.5 or 4.75. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. But that book is My Soul Twin by Nino Haratishvili. It's really hard to read in the sense that there's a lot of infidelity. The characters are really unlikable, but it discusses generational trauma, how the pain from our parents, the unprocessed pain of our parents and grandparents and so on, gets passed down, and that it takes one person to let everything crash down, to get rid of that weight, and then to also not transfer it to the next generation. It's about parents who failed to be adults to their children because of the pain they were feeling, and not realizing to what degree that would affect and dictate the lives of their children afterwards. It's also the discussion of love, or rather true love. Do we love someone because we love them, or do we love someone because we share something together, or do we love someone because that person can understand a part of us that no one else ever would because they experienced it with us or something similar? It discussed so much. It was so cleverly done, and it's only at the end where you realize how everything just came together and why everything was so necessary, even though it was so hard to read. And in those moments I was like, what is this even about? Why do we need to read this? It was a Wuthering Heights retelling, which is interesting. I did not like Wuthering Heights. Enjoyment wise, I didn't love this. I don't know, might bump it up, like I said. And that was also a read that I read for Georgia. Then we have Across the Vanishing Sky by Catherine Cowles. I gave this 4.25 stars. So this is the book that started my romantic suspense journey, because I saw Becca from Becca and the Books read it. She described it. I was like, that sounds like I want to read it. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think from the 3 romantic suspense I read in May, this is definitely my favorite. Maybe it was because it was my first 2, but I think it was also the best written. Again, it's like a 4-brother situation, except that they are the the sons of a serial killer, and they feel a lot of guilt for who their father was and what he did. So they, in their own ways, try to help out with missing people. To kind of give back to the community where they felt their father took away from. And then the female protagonist comes to the small town, decides to move there with her son, because a year before she went hiking with her best friend. They went on a little holiday there, a little girls trip, and so they go hiking, and then her friend disappears, and everyone tells her, you know, animal attacks happen, she could have fallen in the river or whatever, but she feels like there's something more sinister, and no one believes her, but she still tries and goes back and tries to figure out where her friend went, like I said, which leads her to moving to the small town, because she feels like she needs to be there, she needs to find her friend. And yeah, so they get to know each other, of course, romance ensues, suspense ensues, and it was good overall, really. I definitely felt for the characters. They felt pretty real. It was also, I think, the first book I read about missing people, in terms of what it's like for the person that is missing the person. For example, the family or the friends, you know, what it's like not knowing where your loved one is. You know, are they dead? Are they not? Are they mad at you? Did they run away from you? What happened and what were the circumstances? And you know, this horrible feeling of not knowing if they're okay. I'm so lucky and so grateful that I haven't had that experience, and that I hope I never will. It was still one of the first books I read with that experience, and that I think will stick with me for a while. But yeah, with these romantic suspense books, they're all like interconnected standalones. I'm just gonna pick them up whenever I feel like some romantic suspense, some easy read, like a palate cleanser in a way. I'm not going to actively be focusing on completing series. Then we have The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. I gave this 4.5 stars. It's such a cute story. It's about a housekeeper and a professor. The professor has exactly 80 minutes of memory, and after 80 minutes it resets, and so she basically takes care of his house, takes care of him. And it was this cute story of their bond, like the bond that you can have with someone that doesn't remember you. It was beautiful, it was cute, it was a very short read, and I would recommend this to almost everyone. It's just overall a pretty great little book. My tea is getting cold, I've been talking too much. Another book I gave 4.5 stars to was The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. Focus on it, not my face. This is by Shannon Chakraborty. I hope you can't hear the sirens in the background right now. I have read the Daevabad trilogy. I liked it. I'm lying, I really liked it. So obviously I was gonna read this, and with the second book coming out in May, I was like, why not? I was in such a fantasy mood, and this was so good. I laughed so much. This was so funny. This played out like a movie. I could imagine every scene so well. It kind of reminded me of Pirates of the Caribbean. I think if you liked the Pirates of the Caribbean, I think you'd like this. It's basically about a woman who was a pirate but retires when she gets pregnant and has a child, and when something else happens, which you find out later. But essentially there's one job that ends up taking her out of retirement, and she ends up getting on an adventure again that ends up being way more than she first expected. This is so good, so funny. She's, I think, in her 40s or 50s, I'm not sure. And so there's lots of commentary as well on, one, women in leading positions and how men deal or don't deal with that. And then on top of that, an older woman, you know. It was just so funny. I highly recommend it. Like I said, if you like Pirates of the Caribbean, I don't know how to say it, read this. It's good. It's really good. And I can't wait for the second book, but because this kind of ended in a way that it could have been a standalone, I'm okay with waiting a bit before I get to the second one, because I don't want to wait forever for the third one. Then another 4.5 star was Dust Child. I actually finished this 2 days ago. The Mountains Sing is one of my all-time favorite books, which is why I wanted to pick this up, and I can see that this will also be a book that sticks with me. I think I prefer Mountains Sing just a little bit more, but who knows. With Mountain Sing, I think I also gave it 4 stars when I first finished it, but then those characters, that story, everything has been stuck in my mind since then, that I realized like, no, I loved that book, and I have a feeling this might happen with this as well. I finished it and it gave me like a 4.5 star feeling, but the characters have been in my head. It's so vivid, and even while I was in the middle of it, I would think about these characters the whole time. I'd shower, think of them. I literally dreamt about them. They literally invaded my dreams. They felt so real, and there was so many powerful scenes, discussions. This was such an important read. I especially enjoy these books because I have had zero education on the Vietnamese War and just in general Vietnamese history, but especially as well the Vietnamese War and the involvement of the USA and the many aspects, events, effects, etc. of this event in history. And this is the type of book where I think people who say that fiction is not valuable just don't know what fiction truly is, because yes, this is historical fiction. Yes, the characters are not real, but the history is real. Like, the events that happen are so real, and even though these people are not real, these stories probably are. You know, there are probably so many people that see themselves in this and have very similar life experiences. And it was so short too. Such a powerful little book. I highly recommend getting into this author. I think she only has 2 books out. I cannot wait for her to come out with another book. I forgot even to tell you what this is about. You follow 3 characters. One girl who grows up during the war, and her and her sister, their dad's sick. Their parents have a lot of debt. To help out, they go to the capital, which was called Saigon at the time, which is now Ho Chi Minh. I definitely am not doing the tones there. Actually, I want to learn how to do the tones based on how it's written. That's also a large part of this book, is, you know, how, for example, for English speakers, tone doesn't really have an effect on the meaning of the word. Here, obviously, it has a complete different meaning, or no meaning at all if you don't get the tone right. Anyway, so I'm going on a tangent. So this girl, Trang, I think, goes with the sister to the capital, and they end up working as bar girls, which, yeah, I mean, they did everything from flirting to, they called it having a long time. And then you have another character called Phong, I think. He is half Black American and half Vietnamese, and you follow kind of his struggle of what it was like to, for one, be a mixed race child in general. After that time, I mean, because they were a child of an American, they were also seen as the enemy, even though they were Vietnamese. So they obviously experienced a lot of discrimination, and you learn about that. You know, it's things that I didn't really know about. And then on top of that, for him being not just half white, half Vietnamese, but half black, half Vietnamese, added like another layer to that, because the fairer your skin, the more, I guess, high class you are, and the darker your skin, the more you're associated with labor out in the sun, essentially. That was a fly. Essentially being of a poorer class. So you follow his story, and then you follow his attempts as well at bringing his family, his wife and children, to America, because he's been sold the American dream. He thinks that if he goes to the States, that everything will magically be better. And then the third character you follow is a guy called Dan. He is a veteran of that war, and he and his wife go back to Vietnam because they were told that this was going to help him out with his PTSD and guilt, and just, you know, all the emotions that veterans carry with them. And also Dan and Linda, which is his wife, their marriage is a little bit on the rocks, so they're also hoping that this will help them. And so yeah, you follow these 3 people. Really good book, highly recommend. But now let's go to my 3 5-stars of the month. I haven't had many 5 stars, so this is super nice. Also this month I told myself I don't need to be so strict about what I give 5 stars. Honestly, if something is good, and if something feels right in the moment, it can be 5 stars. Some books I know that I'll look back at in a year or so and think, yeah, that was just the right book at the right time. Not necessarily objectively 5 stars, but you know, that's okay too. So the first 5-star I had was Arrow of God by Chinua Achebe. I already spoke about this in the other video, but essentially you follow a chief priest called Ezeulu, and you follow the village's politics, the conflicts, the good, the bad. You learn a lot about their belief system, about the traditions, about in general how life was lived. And this is during the time where the Brits were in Nigeria, but I guess they hadn't put their fingers into everything yet. It was not first contact, so they had kind of gotten used to the white man being in the vicinity, but he hadn't completely taken over everything yet. What I found so interesting about this, I mean, aside, learning all about the people and how they lived, was the way that he wrote the white man. He described so well this weird dynamic of the white man thinking he's showing respect to a people that he doesn't respect. Essentially, the white man doesn't entirely think he's disrespecting them, because in his mind, his customs, his idea of the world is the only right one. And obviously he doesn't even consider the fact that maybe, their way of living, their way of everything else might also be like a good way to do it. The white man's way is not the only way or not necessarily the best way. And it's just so interesting, him thinking he's being respectful when he's not. I don't know. It's a weird dynamic, and he describes that so well in this book. So this is probably one of my all-time favorite books now. Then my next 5-star is The Pomegranate Gate by Ariel Kaplan. This is the first book in the Mirror Realm Cycle trilogy. I actually started this book in January, but I read it via ebook, and for some reason I could tell this was a good book, but I for some reason couldn't read it. And I think it's because I don't know if you can relate, but I find fantasy so much better read physically compared to anything else. So after a while I realized, what? I need to get this book physically. It only arrived, I think, end of April. So as soon as I got it, and like I said, I started this in January, and I couldn't read more than 10 pages at a time. But I think it was the the ebook. And you can see that as soon as I picked this up physically, devoured it. I could not stop reading. I could not put it down. This was so good. I picked this up because I saw this described as a mix between The Bear and the Nightingale and the Devabad trilogy. Two of my favorite trilogies, especially The Bear and the Nightingale, the first book, one of my all-time favorite books too. So when I heard that, I immediately wanted to read it. And I guess I would agree with that. And I highly recommend this. This was so good. It also taught me more about the Spanish Inquisition and, the situation for a lot of Jewish people at that time as well. It's so good. Highly recommend it. I cannot wait to read the second and third book. They're waiting for me in Germany. I already ordered them. I'm going to read them the second I get there. Then my final 5-star of the month was The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love by India Holton. This is one of those books where I don't know if it'll still be 5 stars in 5 years, but I read this at the right time. This is a historical fantasy romance. However, the fantasy is only magical birds. There's no other fantasy. And this was so funny. This was so unserious, but when you finish the book, you realize it was serious after all. It's very much autistic representation as well. The female main character is autistic. It was just so good. It was funny. It made me giggle. I loved it. You definitely had to suspend your disbelief. It was just a funny adventure to follow. And I also made sure to get the next ones. I think they're more interconnected standalones. I'm so excited to read the other ones. They just made me smile. As you can see with the smile on my face now, it just the world was just okay. I devoured this as well. I read it, I think, almost all in one sitting. It was so good. So I think that is all the books. Yeah, that is all the books I read in May. If you read any of these books, please share with me how you felt about them, whether you agree with me, whether you don't, or whether any of these books sound interesting to you. I highly recommend, honestly, a lot of them. I did not hate any book that I read this month, except for maybe the Arcane Arts. But I can't really say that because I haven't actually finished it. And also, I'm sorry about not giving proper synopses for all the books. I'm not great at that. I'm also not someone that loves knowing too much about the book before I get into it. Some books, yeah, some genres, yeah. But for the most part, I try to avoid the synopsis because sometimes I feel like it just spoils too much. And sometimes, yeah, sure, it only spoils the first 50 pages. But I feel like a large part of the joy of reading a book is just discovering it by yourself too. I do think, sometimes you should be aware of certain trigger warnings and so on, especially if they're pretty prevalent, you know. But other than that, I don't love knowing too much of the story, so I'm not very good at sharing the specifics. I hope you're okay with that. I'm very happy about how everything went, and today's the 1st of June where I'm filming this. I'm gonna try and edit it as quick as possible, get it out, we'll see. And I already finished my first book of June. I actually read like 60% of it yesterday, which was still 31st of May, but I finished it today, so I guess you're gonna find out next month. I loved it. Spoiler. Either way, I will see you, I don't know when. I hope you have a lovely day wherever you are. Thank you for being here, if you're still here.